Hi everybody, and we're back for another stream. I am not gonna put the chat up for about 20 minutes and then so I think that's probably gonna be my way I'm gonna do this for a while. Some days I might put the chat up, I guess, but I feel like it's appropriate to do it first, but I'll probably put it up in about 20 minutes. So if anyone has a question or a topic they want to talk about, I will get to it. I just like to get a couple things out before, not I kind of get derailed and then sometimes it can go sideways. So that's going to be the way I think we're going to do it. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we participate in, because I've been seeing this a lot more lately, especially with the everyone's kind of polarizing apart. I don't know if that's a word. I don't know if I even use that in the correct human sense of the word to use that, but everyone's kind of pulling apart in a sense on what that I do. Apologize for have a little bit of a clearing going on with my nasal passages, so but we're going to see how far we get today. Usually our light bodies or soul bodies sort of take over when we need to get through something, so I sound a little bit like Katharine Hepburn used to sound. So okay, everyone's kind of pulling off, and you're starting to see that a lot on all iterations, different realities of social media. So you can pull up one day and you're in one sort of reality of social media where you see just very inspirational stuff, and then you go on another day and you see all this other stuff. Now there's a lot of reasons you see both the mirror images of both sides. Even if you don't so much resonate with what you see, it's appearing in your reality because it is somewhere held in your cellular body. You wouldn't see it at all. We don't see anything that we don't have some kind of a link to. Whether we're running the program, well, that's going to always be true. We might be running the program, or we know we are, even though if we think we've cleared the program or we're unconsciously running the program, it can still be in our DNA. So when we have a clearing, like I've been going through the last couple of days, you're just starting to clear stuff from your cellular body. So, and you'll start to see those clearings usually in a time frame. Like I know I had a very similar clearing a couple of years ago, and this clearing for me is a marker for me to close out that 2-year chapter. So I'm expecting a lot of new stuff to come in the next, in the next reality, because I'm sort of closing out a system. And you kind of see the bookends of stuff. But some days you go on and see some stuff, other days you go on and see stuff that you might not really vibe with, other days you don't really know why you see it. Sometimes we see things because even though we don't so much believe the story of what we see anymore, it's still in our cellular memory. So we're somehow still connected to the collective, right? We're still connected to the collective. And then we get into this whole discussion on what do I do? Do I say something? Do I make a comment? Do I not make a comment? What do I say? And then the beginning, when we're still really in our human programming, and even when we're starting to get out of our human programming and going towards something else, it's harder to figure out what to say. And that's not because, well, that's going to change. There are some points of your consciousness process, and some people call it the ascension process. You're just ascending your consciousness. People want to make it a lot more complicated than it really is. It's really just not that complicated. You're just sending your consciousness and you take your body with it. And that's when you get different realities, different versions of people, alternate realities. That's when you get into the really multidimensional beings, different aspects of yourself. You start noticing a lot of stuff. You start seeing the patterns in things. You start understanding why things happen. You understand why things didn't happen. You start understanding how things are connected. Like you might see someone else's life and really get annoyed by it because you keep seeing them make the same mistake over and over again. They're in the same loop all the time. They haven't really been able to break out of certain things. And when we see that a lot, we sometimes want to say something. Whether we see it on social media, we want to say something. We see it, a person doing it, we might want to say something. But sometimes we have to even go deeper in a sense than that and start to see how, especially if it's a person in your life. If it's not a person in your life, Like I have a lot of peripheral people. Like I might see a person, you know, once every 4 months. This is gonna sound a little harsh, but I think you're gonna know where I'm going when I say it. I really don't care what they're running or what they're doing because they're not impacting my day to day. So there's always a connection, and you know why you're in those realities. You know why you're there for those people. You know why they call you. You have sort of sometimes you know you sort of have a role to play there, and you go and you play the role and you come home and that's it. They'll call you the next time they, you know, need some type of support in something. So those people are not really the people we're going to focus so much on today, even though now with social media, it kind of opens up everybody. So you start to see your entire collective, whether you realize they were in your collective or not. It's not just the main 4 people or 45 people you have in your everyday life. Everyone's going to have it a little different depending on where you are in your process. I would say that the more you go through your process, you get less and less people because you cut ties with everything that's not aligned, and you start to distance yourself from realities that are not highest aligned for yourself. So you don't participate in a lot of stuff. And when you have a lot of collectives participating in a lot of this stuff, you just sort of withdraw from it. Now, that can seem, I've seen a lot of people also say this, and this is going to be everywhere today, so I'll try to whoop it back around at some point, but I've seen a lot of people say, oh, well, that person doesn't want to be in society anymore. And I've heard people be concerned. Oh, this person doesn't want to interact with people anymore. This person's sleeping a lot. And we talked about the sleep last time, and people are saying, oh, people are depressed. People are this. It's not like always going to be labeled one thing or the other. But we start to pull away from people because even if we're doing it and we're not consciously knowing why we're doing it, because we can't take the vibration of it all anymore. It's too much. It's too distorted, it's too much, and we're so depleted in our own, I don't so much like the term soul light, but I'm gonna use it. It sounds a little woo-woo for me, but we're gonna go with that. Because really just you're integrating in more of your soul, the more of your true selves, or selves, because you have so many aspects of yourself and aspects of your soul, aspects of your galactic, you know, races, all those things kind of come together, and you're sort of a big mosh posh of all those things, then you kind of meld them all together. But there comes a time when you just can't participate in stuff anymore, even though there's a part of you that still wants to, because you still have that DNA programming as wanting to be with people. But you want to be with people. That's kind of a very ingrained human programming from ancestral times, ancestral DNA. You by yourself, you're not going to stay around very long. You need to be with a group of people. So when you start pulling away from people, it's very shocking to a lot of people you start pulling away from. And you hear people say things, I heard this one from people, oh, is my energy bad? And it has nothing to do with really the other person. It's just your journeys are not in alignment right now. It doesn't mean it's going to be, it might not be later. Doesn't mean it will be later. Most people, for me, they kind of come in and out. I see people and they kind of come in and out. Most of the people in my life come in and out. I don't have a lot of constant people, like 1, 2, that are kind of constantly there, but not even really constantly there. I don't really have anyone constantly there because I haven't really been able to find an alignment that I could tolerate constantly there. So which brings me back to what I said a few minutes ago, or at this point it could be a few hours ago. Sometimes we have to look at the whole thing. And when we're going through a time we want to pull away from people, sometimes we don't know why. COVID was a big activator to get people out of a lot of realities they were not going to get themselves out of unless there was a fear base there. Fear makes the human move. It always has, and it always will. It motivates the human more than anything else. Everything's rooted in fear. That's what moves the human. That's why the human always creates, or the human kind of backwards creates it. You always set up these realities. Your higher versions of yourself always set up these realities that are going to push your fear and root you in fear. Because that's what gets people to either A, pull out of the whole thing, or B, conform to the group. It depends on where you are in your process. Some people are going to conform to the group because they're still very much in that human DNA and they're letting that control what they do. Doesn't mean they're in the wrong space. There's no right or wrong, good or bad, positive, negative. when you hear that stuff, you're playing in the duality of it pits everyone against one another. And that's not what it's about. That's where they are. They have not cleared that part of the program yet. They will at some point. They might go through a lot of the fear to do it, enact the realities out to do it. That's their chosen path. So you we're starting to see a lot of the people pulling out. It's still motivated by fear, in a sense, fear of something else. Whether it's feeling like they haven't been told the truth, whether it's feeling like they have been a victim of some sort. It's still kind of clearing the victim energy, but everyone's going to pull out on their own or what they're going to pull towards. But it's still everyone's process to do it. Everyone has to decide where they fall on the scale and what part of the process they're in. If you're pulling out of a lot of stuff, which some people are choosing to do that, it's a more conscious act to pull away from it if you don't feel aligned with it, but you're still running an unconscious program. Because there's a still fear-based program that's causing you to pull away. It might not be the same fear someone else has that's deciding not to pull away, to more ingrain deeper into it, which is the protective mechanism we all try to do. We try to just go into it deeper, saying, okay, now you're going to pry it out of my hands, so to speak. But it's still the same program. It's just going about it a different way. But it's still a step in the right direction. Even if you're making a conscious decision to do something, it's just from an unconscious program. You're still running an unconscious program when you're doing it. And that's when things get tricky, when we first start pulling away from things. We have a lot of external pressure to kind of bring us back in. And that's a lot of just aspects of ourselves trying to do that. It's still aspects of ourselves trying to bring us back in. It's just the lower, I don't want to use the word lower, but that's what I came out with. It's still more the human aspects of ourselves trying to bring us back in. Even if we know we're not supposed to be there right now. It doesn't mean you might not, well, I'm going to say this. You might enter back in later, but you're in a different vibration when you do, and it's not the same thing. It changes. You might be more there as a support system than you are participating in it. You don't believe the story. Even if you're making a conscious choice to move away from something, if you still have a story around it, it's still an unconscious program. But you're making a conscious decision to go away from it. So we're starting to see the polarization. And this will kind of go back to somehow how I started, which was on different days we see different things present. We see a lot of judgment about who's doing what, and everyone kind of feels like they have to sort of, not everybody, but just to use the words, they have to kind of jump into it, you know. And there is some people whose role is to get into it and stir the pot up. Even if it's someone that you are so polarized from, that's still the role they play. They're still playing out a role. They're just not knowing that's the role they're playing out. They're believing the program. Doesn't mean they're wrong in that level of consciousness. That's what they believe. That's what they're conditioned, in a sense, to believe. The whole 3D dimensions are conditioning us to do one thing or the other. And it's usually pitting everyone against each other. That's what it does. Because if everyone's arguing with each other, they don't really look up to the core structure of how it all got built in the first place. That's kind of every civilization from the dawn of time. Look over here. Look over here. Don't look over here. Don't look behind the curtain. Don't ever look behind the curtain. We're just going to pit everyone against each other. So there does come a time when you're more conscious than you were. And you have still a lot of people in your life that are unconscious. You might have a lot of people, whether they're in your life physically or in your life virtually. There's really not that much of a difference anymore because we're bombarded with so much virtual stuff now. And when it's kind of funny because when you start to see people, it used to be you were bombarded with longer things, you know, like you got more immersed. And now it's from everywhere, but it's shorter cycles of it because the attention span of the human has shifted. It's not just a child's attention span anymore. It's becoming more the normal human. So social media, in a sense, adapts to that. And then they give you shorter things. It's still the same, just still working through some of the same distortion.
it's just in smaller bits, but it's everywhere. You used to have, it was just kind of Facebook, and even before that there were other things, and you have Instagram. So now it's more visual, and then you get TikTok that's big, but that's kind of short little snippets of things. But everyone kind of gravitates to the smaller stuff because it's more of a direct way. It's snippets of stuff. But we're still kind of being conditioned. And that doesn't so much go, you see a lot of the conspiracy things, and that's the same type of thing. It's a conscious act to look at things, but still an unconscious program that you're a victim in the whole thing. They're still running that unconscious program, but it's a conscious act. Just look at it. It's still progress. And we all had those moments ourselves, and we made a conscious act. It's still from an unconscious program, but it was a conscious act to pull away. So when do you say something? When do you not? When do you get involved in something? When do you not? When do you respond to something? And when do you not? Those are things you really get more discerned about. More discernment comes in on what we participate in, and that's online and in our physical reality. Because like I said in the beginning, if it's someone who's in my life for 2 hours every 3 months, it doesn't matter. You're there, you support, you listen. Some people just want someone to listen to them. Sometimes they might want some type of support or advice. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just want someone to listen and not judge what they're saying. And that's our role sometimes too, just to listen. They're running a victim program, but you also can tell that sometimes they just need someone to listen. And they want someone to verify, yeah, you kind of got screwed. You really got fucked over there. Just to say the words. Because the victim energy always wants to be validated. So if you have anyone running a lot of victim energy, there is a part where they want to be validated. And in one moment, that might be all you have to do is validate, yeah, that kind of sucked. Now, in our minds, we know this whole thing was created by that person. The whole experience was to move them to something else, but they still got to get the victim energy out. And sometimes we can be a safe space to get the victim energy out, even though that's not what they know they're doing. But we really don't have to go farther than that, because it's not someone, and when that person's in another stage of their, consciousness, awakening their consciousness, they'll call on you again. And I know in 6 months we'll hear from this person again, and you go and you check to see where they are. And you see maybe in that point, it's not your role to listen to it. Maybe at that point, it's your role to try to shift it into something else. Even if it's a little bit of shifting. Especially when you have a lot of people that are arguing. It's like eventually people get tired of arguing. Eventually everyone gets tired of fighting. That's why compromising really never works in the long run. Because if it's something someone truly believes in, if they have to compromise, they're always going to feel like they got screwed. But everyone wants to go, compromise. So we tell the children, compromise, play nice. So we try to tell the kids, just compromise, blah, blah, blah. But we don't like to. As adult, human, DNA people, we don't like to compromise. Because every time you compromise, you kind of just, I had someone I went to a workshop years ago, and he would explain it as everyone's just kind of over there. We're just going to build up our war chest, and then I'm going to come at you again. But I'm just going to take this compromise time out, and then I'm going to just build up my war chest, and I'll be back in about, however long it takes. And we'll whomp each other again because you feel like you got screwed. If there has to be a compromise, someone feels like they got screwed. Normally both sides do, because they're in a reality where they don't believe they can all have what they want. Because maybe to everyone have what they want, they can't coexist in the same reality. But most people aren't willing to walk away from reality. That's the toughest part of the journey, in a sense. A lot of people will say, oh, no, it's the, trying to give it an example. It's the time you have to put into it. It's the courses. And you just take courses to kind of trigger yourself. Sometimes you can take something that's not even marked as any kind of course to wake up your consciousness, but it does. You look at stuff and you're like, oh, that's an interesting parody. We see parodies all the time on TV, but we never really cross it over into our real lives to realize it's kind of giving you a view into actually what's going on. But sometimes we don't want to see that. And there's still, it's kind of like a conscious act, but still running from an unconscious program. You see that a lot in TV. They're trying to shine the light on different things that are kind of warped. If anyone watches the show The Boys, a lot of that goes in that show, where they really kind of parody a lot of the things that go on. And you know, we all kind of laugh at that. Like, yeah, that's kind of how it is, but it's still an unconscious program that it's allowed to continue. Even though, and we don't really ever extrapolate it into our own life. As in, oh, that happens to us every day. It's just a TV show. But it's not really a TV show. Even though it's not really showing the whole thing. Realigning your life, taking steps to be conscious is one thing. Realigning your life to that consciousness, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's when it gets tough, because we have to look at a lot of stuff that we might have played in 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And I don't really want to go into linear time, but when we were in a different space, we would have played into this stuff. And now we just can't, because we know it doesn't serve a purpose for us to do it. There's no purpose for us to go into this stuff. There's nothing being created here. And that's kind of where I am on what I'll participate in and what I won't participate in. If I'm not going to create something with this person, if it's just for me to listen to victim energy and get all wrapped up in the story of what happened or what's happening to them, you can be a sounding board. And sometimes I'll just know. I've always been very strong clairaudience. And now I'm pretty strong other things too, but clairaudience is always the one I seem to go back to when I'm in a situation. And we've talked about this before, when our energy fields are with a lot of people, because it's a lot of energy to hold our field in place, because everyone's spinning differently anyway. But if you're spinning at a faster rate than other people, it can be a lot of energy goes to that, and you're not as connected in the moment with that person. So I tend to go back to one of my true signs is, you know, clairaudience, where I'll just maybe hear, you just listen to them. You know, you don't need to play a bigger role here. You might never see this person again. You might see this person again, but in this situation, just listen. That's it. Don't go into anything else. They're not there. They didn't invite you here for this. And sometimes it's people we don't even know. We just show up and this is what happens. Sometimes we might give advice, an opinion if someone asks. If not, you just listen and then you move on. But those realities can be very draining after a while, because the human need for validation is a very pulling energy. Creation energy is a very outgoing energy. It's not pulling anything to you. It's expressing everything out. It's very different energies. So when we say something, when we post something, when we do anything, we have to look at what's the energy of what we're saying. Is it sharing information from our purest place? Is it pulling? Is it trying to get validation? And that's still, the human's always going to want to be validated. And the human, just like the human needs to grieve certain things, our human aspect's going to want that. And you have to decide how long you want to play in it. Just like when we're clearing our own victim energy, how long do I want to set in this? How long do I want to clear it? Do I want to scream for an hour in front of a mirror, or just bitch around for 3 days? Okay. But you consciously know that's what you're doing. When someone's doing it unconsciously, you're kind of listening. But after a while, I can see there's nothing that's going to be created here. You know, there's no point to more of a reality with this person than 2 hours every 4 months, because there's nothing getting created. It's just draining. You know, after a while, I'll start yawning, because my body's getting tired of trying to holding the frequency. After like 5 or 6 hours, I'm like, God, look at the time. Is it 8 o'clock? Wow, it feels like it was just, you know, we just got here. Because I start getting tired. And normally it'll drain me quicker, in a sense. It's not a draining. It's just, you can just feel it affect your field, and your field just can't do it anymore. When it gets really victim, you've kind of served your purpose. You've listened to as much of it as you can kind of listen to, and now it's time for you. But understanding you were there too at some point. At some point, someone did that for you. That's why we get you always hear the term pay it forward. You just kind of put it out there. Everything kind of comes back around. It just might not be with the same people. Normally, it's not with the same people. Sometimes you might see something and you go, oh, that might come back around, but it might be someone totally different. but someone filled that role for us when we needed to sit there and bitch about something forever. But we also can do it consciously. Like when I do it, I'm doing it consciously and I understand why I'm there. I understand that's what they're doing, but I also understand I don't need to bring this into my life. I don't need to bring it into my life because there's nothing moving forward with that. Because when you get really into soul aligned reality, it's all about what you're creating. And yeah, we bust through programming too and we see it, but there's a purpose of we're trying to create something. We're not just going through a reality to bitch about everything in the reality. And you kind of know the ones when you see them where this is going to be what we're going to do. And we're just going to bitch and bitch and bitch and bitch. This is where we are with this, isn't it? And you kind of know this where you are. And then you have to decide what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. Do I really want this in my life? And that's where a lot of times the human will kind of say yes to everything because it has this, it runs a program like that might be all that there is, or that might be all you get, or I don't want to be alone forever. I've heard that one a lot too. Or sometimes people even speak that, and I'm like, yeah, I'll still pass. I'll still pass because some of this, you just have to look at what the situation is. You will know what to do. And in that moment, if you don't know what to do, sometimes it's easier to just have one-on-ones with people when there aren't a lot of people around. Unless you have a really strong connection to go back to when you're with a lot of people, because you're definitely going to feel the difference when you're with a lot of people. Because no one spins at the same exact rate anyway. It takes a while for people to sync their fields up. That's why a lot of people had a lot of issues with when COVID began and the lockdowns began last year, because they had to be in the same place for long periods of time and everyone had to sync their fields. The families that got locked down, you saw a lot of people either strengthen that connection, be able to merge, and other people just went farther apart. And that's why that reality came in for them, to either raise the vibration of the current relationship or dissolve the relationship. Once again, there's no right or wrong, good or bad. That was just where it was. It's a very kind of cut and dry look at it. It's basically what it is. It's not the human. I'm going to say this and I'll go to the chat and check that. The human gets really caught up in what it could be. And I would even say, well, that's always going to be our human though. So let me figure out a different way to say that. I said earlier, like on another one of these, I don't really get angry anymore because I don't really compromise on a soul level on anything. And anger, when we get angry, we're just mad at ourselves. I kind of see where things are going before I participate in them. I know I don't really get angry. I can still find myself getting disappointed that I can see the reality is not going to line up. And that still goes into having expectations about the reality. And that's something we're constantly going to work through because you can see how beautiful it could be if everyone can get over the human shit. And that's easier said than done in a sense because that is a process that takes time for people to do that. It takes time for all of us to do that. We're still all doing that in one capacity or the other, depending on the way we wrote our movie to go, how we wrote our book to go, which was going to get us there. I will get disappointed that you see all the shit in place, all the shit in the way of just having a beautiful reality with a person. And we're not just talking romantic, we're talking in any sense of the word. That's what can kind of, I don't like the word disappointment, because when you say disappointment, it's because we did have, our humans still had an expectation, maybe, but our soul comes in and we're like, no, it's just not going to align. Just not going to work. When you're yawning, it's not working. It's not going to work. If you can't hold it for 3 hours, you're not going to hold it longer than that. Doesn't serve a purpose. Go away, come back in 6 months or maybe never. Someone else will come in with a different vibration that's a little more aligned. But our human always wants to believe there's nothing, no one else. There's nothing more aligned. We get attached to the form. It's never about the form. It's about the energy of the form. The form is just what the energy comes through. That's it. That's why we see the same energy play out with so many different people and different aspects of our lives, because it's just the energy. We've got a matching frequency to that energy. And that's why we keep pulling it back to us in one way or the other. That's why we keep doing it.
Okay, so let me get to the chat real quick and see if I have anything else I want to go through. If I have any questions or general comments. Keep them nice. But you don't have to keep them nice. It is live, yes. Well, it was live. But I think I did actually pretty good at that. I had one guy ask me once, he's like, are you real? You didn't breathe at all. And the whole thing you were saying, you didn't breathe once. I'm like, yeah, I know I didn't breathe once. I did. It's just different. Like we can get through a lot of stuff really fast. Because we just kind of connect. That's why I used to open with the chat, and it could derail me a little bit just because everyone's vibration's a little different. So sometimes I like to just get something out there and then go to the chat. It also kind of sets vibration for the room. And I find once we set a vibration for the room, it's a little different. Because if you're interested in what's going on, you'll come back and see it later. And if you're just in for different reasons and it's not vibrationally aligned, you won't hang for very long. Even though it's important you came at one time. No, I think I said this in the beginning when I was saying, I can't remember where I was going. Oh well, I guess it doesn't matter. Yeah, I lost it. I don't know what I was saying. It's like I'm probably going to pitter out a little bit too. So yes, these are live when I do them. I just kind of can go off for a while and talk about this type of stuff and then take questions. But I don't think I'm going to have any questions today. I did not feel like I would. But when we get to talking about what do we participate in, we have to look at every part of our lives. What do we participate in? And being in the collective, and not even, and the collective is anything. The collective can be a football team. It doesn't matter what it is. It's your collective. You have a lot of small collectives and bigger collectives. We all link up to certain collectives. There are some people who, once again, it's a conscious choice to an unconscious program that wants to take the collective down by attacking the collective. You take the collective down in a sense. I mean, there's a lot of ways to dismantle a collective, but you pull out of it. You just don't resonate with it anymore. You don't participate in it anymore. And sometimes that is through just not saying anything. Sometimes you might feel it's appropriate to say something. Sometimes you feel like it's not appropriate. It's that old adage, you got to read the room. Sometimes you do. You have to read the room and see, is this just going to cause an argument? Or is it something that can really be of value to be said? Because our energy fields are doing a lot of work with other people's fields when we're together. And even electronically, even though I do feel like you have to have someone in the room to really see if you can align in reality, you have to kind of meet the person and feel that, closer than virtually. I feel like you get an idea virtually of where everybody is. I can get a text from someone and know where they are. I can read the energy off the text to know if this is appropriate or not appropriate. So we can do either way. But I do feel like we have to really look at what we participate in and realize, why are we there? Especially if we know it's not aligned. Why are we still participating in it? Why are we still feeding the old stuff? What are we getting out of it? Because somewhere your human's getting something out of it, or it wouldn't still be participating in it. I see a lot of people participating in stuff they don't even enjoy anymore. They're using old words, like you see the word survivor a lot. There's still a victim energy in that word. It doesn't mean it might not be appropriate in certain places for you to use that word, but it's still a victim word. So sometimes it's sometimes you just pick a different word. Sometimes we don't have to say anything. That's what I was going to say. Our energy fields are always activating other people's energy fields. You don't really have to say anything at all. Energetically, your presence is there. Sometimes I don't say anything. I'll go in a room and say nothing because I wasn't supposed to. Our human wants to kind of sometimes get the last word in or say something. But we really have to look at the energy we're coming from when we want to say something. And that goes for in person or virtually. Is it really going to add to something? Is it really going to add to the conversation? If
If it's not going to really add to the conversation, then do we do it in the first place? Is there a reason to do it in the first place? We have to look at all that stuff. So I think that is going to be it for me today. A little shorter than normal, but I'm sure I'll feel much better by the next time I have to do this. And I'll have to do that. That sounded pretty. When I feel it's required to do this, because I do enjoy these. Okay, so I'll see everyone next time, and thanks for listening. Bye.